Hey, welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be reviewing a great book by the one and only Brandon Sanderson. Now, Brandon Sanderson, if you do not know, is, how do you explain this lightly? He's the king of fantasy at the moment. He's the guy. He releases a book every second, it seems, with a new one coming out tonight as I'm recording. We're going to be talking about his first secret project that I just finished reading, which is Tress of the Emerald Sea. Now, how would I describe this book? Well, Tress is a girl from a little island. I forget the island's name because I'm really bad with places, but just know it's a little island. It's not far. You can see from end to end is how I believe it to be. Her entire life, she's only known this island because the people who are born and who live on the island are not permitted to leave by the king. The magic system in this story is something like no other, obviously, because it's Brandon Sanderson, and he will always do an amazing job with the magic system. Now, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of like sand. Mark Rober, of all people, and Brandon Sanderson have an amazing video that explains exactly what it is, but just imagine a sea of sand where the sand acts as water most of the time, except for when it stops. This leaves the sand-like particles, which in the book are known as spores, are the main magic system. When any of the spores react with water, they have some sort of effect. So the main ones are, without spoiling anything, the ones that surround Tress's Island are green, and they kind of like bloom into vines and tree-like substances. It's kind of hard to understand. He does a much better job in this book than I will do here, because he has had years and years of practice conveying his thoughts to the world, and I don't know how to put it into words, but if you read the book, you'll understand the magic system. It's a very simple magic system, which is good. It's very good to know that. I would say it's a gateway Brandon Sanderson book. It's definitely one that if you want to dabble in Brandon Sanderson, if you're kind of hesitant to dabble in Brandon Sanderson, this is the book for you. It's easy to understand once you get how like everything works out, and the world building's great, obviously. Now let's talk about how the book looks. I have a library copy because I didn't buy the book. I got into reading after the whole Kickstarter thing, so I wasn't there. So I wasn't able to buy one, obviously, but my library did, and I picked it up. So it looks like this. Just ignore the blue sticker and the yellow one on the bottom. This is Tress of the Emerald Sea. It's an amazing cover. I think it's great. I think it even looks better without the library glossiness sheet on top, and it's a beautiful book. The back covering the library stuff, there's a note that he says that he wrote it for his wife, which I think is great. If you didn't know, he wrote this book for his wife, and his wife told him to share it with the world. So here he is, and he released it to all of us. This is the first of his secret novels, which I've read 1 and 2 now, so I'm all caught up until, what time is it now? We got a few more hours until the next one comes out, which, will be an interesting thing. Now, when it comes to the price for this book, I've seen that you can get it for around $20 at secondhand stores, like Half Price Books, which is the one near me, and other ones, and it's probably going to be around $20 to $30 because it's a hardcover at, normal bookstores. Just because it's a normal book. It's being mass-produced though, so I don't think you'll be too hard-pressed to find a copy, unlike some other books that have come out recently. This one definitely has picked up a lot of steam, so they're making more and more of them. I've always seen it whenever I go to any bookstore, so it doesn't seem like you'll have any trouble finding it. Now, my thoughts on the book, besides what the book is about, which I guess I haven't even explained yet, so let's do that first before we go into my thoughts. This book is about Tress, who's on an island, who's surrounded by spores, and she's not allowed to leave the island, but through circumstances, she leaves the island to follow a boy. Not really follow a boy, but to save him from the evil sorceress. And through many trials and tribulations, she goes through this long, amazing journey in the book. And it's a great book, I'd say, after you get through the initial world building. The initial world building, it didn't hit for me, mainly because I like fantasy with high action and high octane things. And it was kind of what I'd say lax. It was like, here's Tress, she really loves cups, she lives on this island. It was like this lackadaisy type of deal that went on, and it just kind of felt like a slice of life for the first few chapters of the book, which is fine, but I went into the book knowing absolutely nothing besides the title. I didn't even read the back cover. I don't want to spoil too much of the book. There's twists and turns in the book, just like any other book, but overall, ending was great. I loved it. It's written in the perspective of one of the characters in the book that is not Tress, which is very interesting. I love it, and I think that his third secret project, I could be totally wrong about this, so don't take my word for it, is going to be written in the same perspective as the character in this book. I am really bad with explaining books without spoiling the books, so I don't think right now I'll do a spoiler review on it, but just know that it was a great book. But we'll go on to my thoughts on the book. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5. I think it could be a 4.4 or it could be like a 4.55. I'm not gonna go into it. It was a really good book. It really picked up in the middle to the end. When you're being introduced to a lot of new characters and when you kind of don't really know what's going on fully, it gets a little, it's not annoying, but I felt not motivated to read the book. But once, not even in the middle of the book, just once you get through the first few chapters, it was an amazing book. I truly loved it, but it definitely was not one of my favorite books, maybe because it just wasn't my cup of tea. I'd say it's more 4.4 out of 5, but it definitely is a good book overall. I felt like the characters in the book I couldn't really relate to. I tried listening to the audiobook at the start while reading it instead of actually reading it because I just kind of wanted to read the book, but I didn't have the time because I was reading other things and I wanted to finish those before I read this book. But I didn't like the audiobook. I think the guy who did the voice, which I'm mistaken, he did a really good job at the male characters' voices, but he kind of did a higher pitched voice for Tress's voice, and it just felt off to me while listening to the audiobook. So I definitely recommend, if you're an audiobook listener, give it a listen. I'm sure you could get it on Libby for free at your local library, or just pick it up from the library. I wouldn't say spend money on it if you were going to. I'd say just get the book and read the book. But from my point of view, I listened to the first two chapters in audiobook, and then I went back and just reread the whole thing because I couldn't really pay attention to it. It wasn't my cup of tea when it comes to audiobooks. But overall, the book is amazing quality. I think the story is great. When it comes to my taste in stories, it wasn't fully there at the start, but it picks up. This book has the same vibe as Legends and Lattes. It fits the cozy fantasy category to a T. If you want a book that you want to be invested in, but you don't want your heart to be ripped out of your body by the words on the page, this is definitely the one for you. If you're looking for something to just settle down at night and start reading and maybe read a chapter or two, this book is for you. If you want the hardcore gritty fantasy where you got character perspective changes and gruesome violence, this isn't the book for you. There's fight scenes and there's things that are going on, but it's not going to be what you get in maybe Brandon Sanderson's other books. Like Mistborn, it was definitely a different vibe than this book entirely. But that's not to say it was bad in a way. It's just, I needed to read this book at different times than normally. If you're looking for a palate cleanser book, this is a great book for you. It's definitely something that you should pick up. But overall, I'd say it was a success for the start of Brandon Sanderson's secret projects. It's definitely one of the books that if you don't know who Brandon Sanderson is, or if you want to get into his work, you should definitely read it. If you already love Brandon Sanderson, I'm sure you've already read it, but if you haven't, I implore you to check it out. It's a great book. at that. And if you are looking for something to just settle down at night, or you're reading another book but it's like a hardcore gritty book and you want something to just like cleanse your palate for a chapter, or for like just a small part of the day after you've read like this hardcore hitting fantasy book, or just any hardcore hitting book. I mean, I read Crime and Punishment, and if I had this book right after Crime and Punishment, it would have been the best palate cleanser after finishing reading that book. But it's definitely the book for you. I'd say it fits the bill when it comes to a generalized public audience book. If you give this book more times than not, most people will say, yeah, it was a decent book. So that's all I have to say overall with this book. It's not gonna be a long video, but it's definitely one that I wanted to get out there because I have to return this book to the library soon, so I wanted to have it to show. And I just finished it, so it's fresh in my mind. Definitely have a glass of water handy while you're reading this book. It made me thirsty multiple times while reading the book, and yeah. Thank you for watching. I had some very nice comments on the last video, so I appreciate you guys watching that. If you haven't seen it, I implore you to check it out, but you know, no harm, no foul. Thanks for watching. Bye.